And I read that his mother lived with him most of the time. I had wondered if it was just because they got along so well, or if it had to do with his father being involved with the Mirabile killing. I was quite shocked when I came across these reports. Do you know how that affected the family?
My grandma Mert lived with him everywhere. He loved her and wanted to care for her always. In regards to the Mirabile murder on December 27, 1958, in Hillcrest, California, Victor Francis was caught up in a life-changing crisis that dramatically influenced the whole Buono family. Ryan Murphy's mini-series, Feud, possibly opened up a dark and buried secret of Victor Francis Buono. On the internet, there is an official legal document titled People versus Buono. It is a document of the robbery and death of Antonio Mirabile in 1958. Tony Mirabile was a young member of the Purple Gang Mafia in Detroit, Michigan in the 1930s, and he later became the head mafia boss of San Diego in the 1950s. Victor Francis wasn't the one who killed him, but he was part of the conspiracy of robbing him, though. My father, Louis M. Erica, also called Sonny, was a police officer in San Diego at that time of the Antonio Mirabile murder. Where my father fits into the Buono family as being the son of Myrtle Bell Keller. He was born in October 19, 1927, and his father was Louis Rupert Erica. The marriage between Louis Rupert Erica and Myrtle Bell didn't last very long, and it wasn't until my father was around 6 years old in 1933 that he went to live with his mother and Victor Francis Buono. When my father heard of the arrest of his stepfather, Victor Francis, he was emotionally stunned when he went into the San Diego County Jail to speak with him. Being a San Diego police officer made it all the more difficult for him because of the shame and the way he felt about that horrific event in his life. That was a tragic moment for Victor Charles when he was attending college at Villanova University in Pennsylvania. During this time period, there was no information on the internet that clearly described what was really happening within the Buono family between the years of 1958 and 1959. Between the years of 1957 and January 1959, my Uncle Victor Charles was performing in productions at the Oak Globe Theater, and he had left Villanova University and came back home, and he started attending at the University of San Diego. Victor Charles soon stopped going to the University of San Diego, and that was the time he started acting in television and motion pictures in Hollywood. The Buono family was still living near South Mission Beach in San Diego, California during that time period. It's clear to me that Victor Charles, at 20 years old, became the bread maker of the Buono family, and many doors of opportunity in Hollywood were ushering him into his professional career.
So Victor Francis Buono was out of the picture for at least 7 years. I did read, though, that he did manage his son, at least for a while around 1970. Is that correct? And I know now how far apart your father and Victor were age-wise. How much younger is David?
I'll first address how much younger David Francis is. He was born in 1946 and was 7 years younger than Victor Charles, who was born on February 3, 1938. My father, Sonny, was 11 years older than Victor Charles when he was born, and he was his half-brother. My step-grandfather, Victor Francis, was sent to San Quentin State Prison around 1959, and he served a sentence of approximately 9 to 10 years, and then he was released around 1969. When I saw my step-grandfather after he was freed from prison, Victor Charles was moving from his monkey house that was located at Yamashiro Chinese restaurant in Hollywood. It was a small dwelling cut into rock, and Victor Charles's bed laid above the small living room. There was a small kitchen, and it had floor and ceiling windows that overlooked the Grom's Chinese Theater below on Hollywood Boulevard. In the monkey house, there were 3 high bookshelves stacked full of books and looking like a library, and there was a desk where he wrote his poems for his book. It could be verse. My father Sonny and I were visiting there at that time, and Victor Charles told us when we first arrived that his neighbor was over there to the right. It was Raymond Burr's house, who played the lawyer in the television program Perry Mason. I was asked to drive back to the monkey house alone with my step-grandfather, Victor Francis, to pick up more items. It's quite a distance driving from Malibu Beach to Hollywood Boulevard, being around 31.5 miles, and taking around 1 hour to get there. While we drove along the Pacific Ocean, there wasn't any conversation between us. I just looked out of the car window and thought about what it must have been like for him being in San Quentin State Prison. I didn't know what to say to him, and apparently so didn't he. I obviously couldn't ask him, "Grandpa, how does it feel being free from prison?" It was just impossible for me to come up with any proper topics of conversation. I hoped he would break the ice and ask me something like, "How's school going for you, Wayne?" Or, "Do you have any girlfriends now?" Anything would have been all right instead of silence. And I remember looking over at his profile, trying to perceive what he was thinking about too. There was nothing but a blank expression on his face. Looking back over the years, I realize now that we were just, unfortunately, strangers after his long time in prison. He didn't know me, and I didn't know him. And after 9 long years in prison, he may have had a habit of keeping his thoughts to himself. My step-grandfather, Victor Francis, did assist my Uncle Victor Charles's acting career in the early 1970s, and he spent the rest of his years visiting or living with Victor Charles and my grandma Mert at their Apple Valley Ranch near Victorville, California.
Since you said he also later lived with Victor Charles at his Apple Valley Ranch and his mother Myrtle Bell, does that mean your grandparents stayed a couple after all that time apart?
When my step-grandfather, Victor Francis, was released from prison around 1969, I wasn't informed of where he was presently living. But I do know he wasn't living with my grandma Mert as a newly happy married couple. I do know they did remain friends for the rest of their lives. My Uncle David Francis was living with his first wife at Manhattan Beach, next to Hermosa Beach and near Redondo Beach in California. David told me his father, Victor Francis, would just pop into his house carrying grocery bags of food and stuff them in his refrigerator up to the brim. I always thought that was a very kind gesture by my step-grandfather's behalf. It was in the early 1970s, and I didn't know exactly where my step-grandfather was living at that time. Victor Francis died on May 17, 1981, at the age of 73 years old. I don't know if he was living or just only visiting at Victor Charles's Apple Valley Ranch leading up to his death. I was living in Glendale, California, outside of Los Angeles in 1978, and around that time I called Victor Charles's house to see if I could come by for a visit at his Apple Valley Ranch. It was my grandma, Mert, that picked up the phone and said Victor Charles was out of town and wouldn't be back very soon. I soon thereafter took my family to Boyne City, Michigan to live. I remained in northern Michigan and I was a disc jockey at WWPZ 1340 in Petoskey in 1981. I never forget that day on 1st, 1982, when I went to the radio station and pulled the AP Associated Press ticker newsfeed to record on tape. But suddenly, I saw Victor Charles's name. At first, I wasn't surprised because I often saw his name popping up in new television programs and motion pictures. But this time was different, and it read, Victor Buono collapses and is dead at 43 years old. I was stunned. I immediately got on the phone and called my father, Sonny, asking, "What happened to Victor Charles?" He said, "Victor is gone."